This week we're comparing starting a new business with planning a bank job, and we're digging under the bonnet of one of the world's top business coaching organisations. This week I'm joined by Daniel Priestley, award-winning author of many of my favourite business books and serial entrepreneur. You are in for a treat. Hi there and welcome back to Amplify, the Digital Marketing Entrepreneur podcast. I'm Bob Gentle, and every week I'm joined by amazing people who share what makes their business work. If you're new, take a second right now to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes, and you can grab some older ones when you're done with this one. Don't forget as well, you can join my Facebook community. Just visit amplifyme.fm/insiders and you'll be taken right there. So, welcome along and let's meet Daniel. So this week I am delighted to welcome Daniel Priestley to the show. Daniel's probably one of the authors I've read most consistently, and lots of podcast listeners won't know this. The reason there is a podcast now is largely down to a lot of the inspiration I got from your first book, Key Person of Influence. So for those people who haven't heard of you, Daniel, welcome to the show. Why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about who you are, where you are, and what you do?
Bob, thank you very much for having me on the show and for reading all 4 books. I know that you organise your books by colour code, so so all of my books are the same white, red and blue. So hopefully I've been very helpful in getting the books side by side on your shelf.
Yeah.
So I'm an entrepreneur by background. I launched my first company when I was 21 years old. I'd never actually had a proper job in terms of a regular paycheck or knowing how much I would earn at the end of the month type thing. Launched a company in the marketing space and grew very, very rapidly. We went from 0 to $1 million in the first year and then 1 to 11 million in the 3 years after that. And that was in Australia, mostly in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne. And then when I got out of that business in 2005, 2006, I was looking for some adventure, something to do. So I came to the UK and I started a business here in the UK, which once again was a fast growth company, which we grew here in the UK. So that was all around the early 2000s. And around 2010, I wrote the book Key Person of Influence and launched something called the Key Person of Influence Accelerator, which has grown into an accelerator business called Dent Global. And Dent Global runs accelerator programs for entrepreneurs all over the world. We've got offices in Sydney, in Toronto, and in London. We've got about a team of 60 people, and we also have part of the business that does award-winning film production, IT services, and book publishing. So it's an interesting group of companies. But I guess, look, people ask me what I do. I guess I'm entrepreneurial. I do a fair few different things. I write books and I start and grow companies.
Now, there's a thread there. Starting a marketing company, fine. Lots of people have started marketing companies. To grow it to $1 million in the first year, that's already unusual. 11 million shortly after, even more unusual. So leaving that, okay, we're talking about what's essentially in 2010-ish oversubscribed, which is essentially, to sum it up for the listener, it's a personal brand business book, essentially. Would you agree that that's a horrible summary?
A key person of influence?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if you think about how I was able to grow those businesses really fast, the cornerstone strategy was to put someone who was very well known up on stage and to do roadshow events. And we had dragons from Dragon's Den, and we had best-selling authors and business personalities as regular features in our conferences that we ran. And that brought in a lot of people, and actually the businesses grew off the back of those conferences. So when I wrote the book Key Person of Influence, essentially I was kind of sharing a little bit behind the scenes of how we'd built those businesses using that strategy. So yes, it was one of the very first personal branding books in that category, which is now quite a category. I don't even remember a very big awareness of the words personal branding when I was writing it. But now there's this real category of personal branding books. So it was in that personal branding space very early on, but it was just kind of that strategy that we had leveraged in order to grow a couple of fast growth businesses. At that stage, it was 3 businesses that had each gone to 7-figure revenues all within 12 months.
Well, that was kind of where I was going, was from key person of influence, which is, as I said, it's essentially one of the first personal branding related books. Out of that springs another business that's employing 50 people around the world, 60 people around the world. Lots of people have written personal branding books, but they haven't done that. And I think what you've said there is the manual on how you did it. Really, that for me is one of the standout features, is lots of people do things, but they don't do what you've done with them. And that was really what I wanted to burrow into a little bit, is putting modesty aside. What is it about Daniel Priestley that seems to do things differently with what everybody else has available to them? Because everyone has the same opportunities.
Well, I would say that one of the things that probably makes me a little bit different to 75% of entrepreneurs statistically is that I love building teams. So essentially, because I started very young and because I never completed university, I've always assumed that other people know more than I do and that other people would be better at a job than I would be. So every business I've ever started, we almost on day one start with a team of 4. That's a common strategy for me, that there's always 4 people in the room on day one. And then very rapidly we kind of get up to a team of 8, and we, every time the business grows, we just keep hiring people and putting people into roles, and we try and recruit and enroll talented and energetic people. And most of the time, my attitude is stand back and get out of their way, get them really enrolled in the vision of what we want from them, and then excuse yourself and let them know that you're a resource if they need a resource. But other than that, they're in control.
So if I put myself in the shoes of a lot of people that are in the very early startup stage of their business, they will go typically one of 2 routes. They'll bootstrap the ass off it. They won't spend any money until they've made that money. And or the alternative path is they'll go out with an idea, they're looking to fund that idea, and they typically won't hire until there's some money to pay for those people. I guess if I go back to the very first marketing business, what was the first hire there? How did that hire get funded?
So I personally think starting a business should be a little bit like robbing a bank.
I like that.
If you see a movie about a bank robbery, they're sitting down in the basement, in the dingy little basement, and they've got a big piece of paper, and they're drawing out like all their thoughts and their plans, and they're kind of working out who will do what and how they might split the money when the money is in the duffel bag. And, okay, we're going to cross the border to Mexico, and then you're going to get 2 shares and I get 3 shares and you get 1 share, and they kind of like divvy it up like that. So, and then someone says, oh, but what about the security guard? And then they come up with a plan for that. And someone says, what about the alarm system? Well, then we come up with a plan for that. And there comes a point where they kind of go, you know what, I think we can do this. And my businesses have always started that way, where I get some smart people in the room and we're sitting around having a conversation about, wouldn't it be cool if we did a business like this, and what would we do and how would we do it? And we're just having fun playing with that. And then the question obviously comes up, well, if we do this, how will we all get paid? So then you come up with a way of how we all get paid. That's just one of the things that has to be solved. So in day one of my very first company, a good friend of mine was an amazing salesperson, very good at hitting the phones and making sales. So that was pretty simple. That was just come and join the company and we'll give you 10% of every sale that you make. And if you don't make any sales, you'll earn nothing. And if you do make sales, you'll get 10%. So that was an easy hire. And then a young guy called Nick, I basically said that he could stay rent-free in the house that we were renting, and that covered half of his wage. And then the other half was $15 an hour or something like that. But the thing about most people's pay is that you've got a month of their work before you have to pay them. So I just assumed that we would probably have money in the bank at the end of the month if we made some sales. And I probably had on my credit, well, I do remember I had a credit card with $20,000 limit, so I figured I could probably advance myself some money if I needed to pay Nick's wage if I needed to. Now, mind you, I'm making this sound a little bit more haphazard than it was. Let me just rewind this so that people are not misled. The prior 2 years to that, I worked in a startup, and I said I'd never had a proper job. I was actually part of a startup at age 19 to 21, and the founder of that business had asked me to set up as a consultancy to that business rather than employing me. And I just invoiced at the end of the month based on a combination of sales and time spent. So he had said, that was my business consulting to his business. But we had gone from 3 of us on day one to about 50 people 2 years later, and from 0 to 6 million in revenue in 2 years. I had one hell of a ride for 2 years leading up to that point. So I'd had a shotgun seat in a fast growth startup for 2 years. And then I got 2 years in, and I asked John whether I could get some shares in the business. And I was wanting to negotiate ownership in the business because I'd brought in something like 750 grand. And he said to me, "Listen, Dan, if you want shares in a business, go start your own business." And he was basically trying to brush me off, but it planted the seed in my head of going off and starting a similar business. And I went, actually, you know what? I wouldn't mind doing that. So I did. So we were not completely green, and we weren't completely naive in the sense that I had actually just come straight off the back of a very successful startup.
I think once you've been on the periphery of something like that and it's become normalized for you, it's actually much easier sometimes to recreate it. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that word normalization is such a powerful word. I would really say that one of the things that hardly ever gets talked about is this idea of what's normal, what's normal for a person. So, you hear about kids who grow up in fairly wealthy families, and it's normal to discuss business over dinner, and it's normal to think about who in the family circle might have some money to invest in a startup idea, and it's normal for a business to be doing 1 to 5 million as a little family business or part of the family business empire. And therefore, that normalization means that you're highly likely to go off and do that. And the opposite can be true. You can grow up in a family where it's not normal to talk about money. It's not normal to be successful. It's not normal to see something take off. And therefore, you're really fighting a psychological barrier that you're essentially outside of your realms of what's normal.
I absolutely get that. And I think something that struck me many times over the years is I'll meet very capable, very creative, smart people working in a job as an employee somewhere, and I'm scratching my head thinking, you should really be doing this on your own. And occasionally I'll mention it, and fear is often something that's pushed back. I could never do that. I could never run my own business. It feels so, and the word risky comes up again and again. And I'm sitting there thinking, only one person has to get annoyed with you before you're out on your ass. You know how many people have to get annoyed with me?
Yeah.
How do you, because you do work with organizations like the Prince's Trust, so you work with startups, you start up companies. I wouldn't say you do it all the time, but it's not something you're unaccustomed to. How often do you come across sort of startup fear, and how do you deal with that?
So I come across it, well, it's normal to come across it because essentially growth requires you to step outside your comfort zone. And, by definition, you have to stretch into the unknown. And we all come up against a particular comfort zone. There are certain friends of mine, like a friend of mine who's a much greater entrepreneur than I am. He just because of all the things happening with COVID, he decided to lease a jet for £80,000 a month and just basically continue flying around doing what he wanted to do. And he just said, "Oh well, I'm sure that it'll pay for itself over time." And so we all have our comfort zone. For me, that made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. But the funny thing is that I really do believe that environment dictates performance, and that you need to be in an environment where whatever you're about to do becomes normal. So I'll give you an example from my personal life, which is that I've never really taken any interest whatsoever in fitness. It's just something I've never had. I didn't grow up in a family that was into sport. I kind of never had any great sporting moments that kind of haunt me to this day or anything like that. And I've just never found terribly much interest in sitting around a gym and lifting heavy plates of metal, or anything like that. So I've kind of always engaged in business and family and friends and all that sort of stuff, but never very much sport. Anyway, I decided a few months back that I was going to join a gym and get myself a little bit fit after I saw a very unflattering photo of myself and thought, oh, wait a second, I need to kind of have a jaw. And I joined a CrossFit gym. And basically, I couldn't believe it, because as soon as I would get into the environment of these CrossFit classes, it was unbelievable what I was capable of and what I would push myself to do. And it just was because that was normal in the context of the class. There's eight people all going through a 1 hour grueling workout. All of us want to stop, but none of us can stop. We've got this person who's really calling the shots. We've got all this equipment that we've got the list of exercises that we've got to get through, and it's all like the environment is so pervasive that you just simply end up doing the workout. And like we all say the same thing at the end, which is I would never be able to push myself that hard if I were to try and do that on my own. And it's like that with entrepreneurship, that if you're not around people who are pushing themselves or pushing their barriers, or if you're not around entrepreneurs who are pushing your barriers, then it's so impossible, especially if you work from home, to kind of radically start, you're not going to suddenly go radically going out there and having funding meetings and hiring people and developing digital assets and talking to software companies in the Ukraine about whether they can code up a MVP for you or anything like that, because it's just a set of things that just all of them together feel like a bit of a difficult step in too many directions. And yet if I place you around 60 other people who are all doing those things and I'm calling the shots, then you go, oh, okay, well, I just have to get that done in the next 2 weeks, so I better do it. So environment dictates performance, and environment dictates normalization, to go back to what we were saying before, is a really powerful idea.
I think I absolutely echo that. I spent most of my career in a very competitive space and would never spend really much time with other business owners unless they were my client. And I moved out of that competitive space, and suddenly I was speaking to business owners in a very, very different way, and spending times in masterminds and things like that. And my business has changed faster in that short period of time than it has in the previous 20 years. So spending time with people who are on the same journey is ridiculously powerful. And it's actually very rare that most of us, as business owners, as entrepreneurs, we're fairly isolated, because it's actually a fairly rare breed. I mean, you're in London, it's probably a little easier, but I'm willing to bet you have to put yourself in situations where you can have these conversations, because they don't happen in the post office.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the thing. You have to join the gym in the first place, right? So the hard part is you've got to actually, like for me, I've got to walk down to that CrossFit gym and look at all those incredibly fit people and say, you know what, I'm going to jump, even though it feels out of my depth, I'm going to jump in and join this thing and turn up to those first few classes and push through that initial discomfort. But yes, you have to find yourself, like in the same way that you're not going to bump into someone on the street who says, hey, let's do a workout and really push each other. You have to find a place where that is already happening and that's already going on. The beauty is that ever since COVID, we've all gone and taken these things online. So, Bob, whereas previously you wouldn't have flown to London once a month to work with us, you might jump on the Zoom calls every 2 weeks that we have. We now run 3.5 hour Zoom sessions every 2 weeks with our clients. And it's, you're in an accountability group and you've got a coach and all this sort of stuff. And then very rapidly, we've got clients now in Amsterdam and South Africa and Dubai. And, we basically broke the company into 3 time zones, and we were in 7 cities, and we had footprint in 7 cities with venues in 7 cities. And then at COVID, we just went, let's go all online and run it out of London, Sydney and Toronto. And those 3 time zones, we literally just cover the whole time zone now. And it's just an amazing shift. And it means that a lot of people who didn't previously have access to this type of environment now suddenly do.
I really like that because it kind of takes me where I wanted to go next. I was having a bit of a flick through Key Person of Influence before we started talking, and immediately one phrase jumped out at me, and it was, "The world has changed and so must you." It's kind of your banner at the front of the book. And there was never anything more appropriate than right now, for the moment right now. I guess the reason I'm saying this is oversubscribed and subsequent books, they really do provide quite a helpful roadmap for anybody who can't do business the way they've always done it. Everything that you go through in Key Person of Influence can be adapted to overcome the current situation for most business owners. So how are you finding your clients are adapting? Are people sort of caving in panic, or are they being proactive?
No, I would describe it like a wave, that the wave is going through the economy and you're either surfing it or getting dumped by it. And our clients are surfing it, because we've been preparing them for years. So, in 2000, I wrote that word, I wrote "The World Has Changed and So Must You" 2009. That was the first one, and I wrote that probably after the global financial crisis. But in 2000 and in the 2010s, the last pages of 24 Assets basically say that be careful, the 2020s are going to create a radical shift in the way we live and work, and everything's going to change again. And essentially, there's two reasons for massive wholesale change. Number one is that whenever you get big technological change, technology changes the way humans live and work. So Bronze Age, changes the way, things live, the way we live and work. And, when we get to the agricultural age, we then had new technology of steam engines and factories and tractors, and that moved us into factories, and it changed the way that we live and work. And essentially, what has happened is that there's these computers that are connected, and there's these new organizations that can spring up around an idea really rapidly, but don't rely very much on geography or anything traditional in terms of business. And there's always a delay of about 20 to 30 years for society to actually shift and completely begin the reorganization around this new technology. So, even in the early 2000s, I was saying that we're probably 15 years away from a shift. And you can see videos of me talking about this. I'm not just kind of making it up in hindsight. You can go back and actually watch the videos where I'm talking about it. But I was basically saying we're going to have a wholesale shift in the way that we live and work. We're going to see global small businesses. We're going to see tiny little companies that are multinational that have 1 inch wide niche with a mile deep of customers. We have to have new ways of approaching our marketing and our business strategy. So I was expecting that to happen in the 2020s. Couple that with the aging baby boomer generation, where 2/3 of all businesses are owned by people turning 70. You essentially have a massive disruption on its way. So I never knew there would be a pandemic, but I knew something would trigger a huge disruption to the Western economies just because of the age demographics.
And it's inevitable anyway. The sort of dominance of the global geopolitical setup, it changes radically from time to time. That's almost inevitable as well.
Yeah, and the pendulum is swung, right?
So one book that I haven't read of yours is 24 Assets, and the title has always intrigued me. That's the one that I'm sorry, I haven't read that one.
Well, it's a terrible title. The title of a book should always tell you the benefit, the outcome of what you hope to achieve as a result of it. So getting oversubscribed is a reasonable title. Becoming a key person of influence, a reasonable title. 24 Assets is a typical example where the author fell in love with the methodology and invented something and kind of became a parent to it and just wanted to talk about it. But had I called the book Digital Scalable Fun, it probably would have resonated with a few more people. But
yeah, you see, now you've got me.
Yeah, so so the idea is that the business is made up of 24 unique assets. All businesses are made up of 24 unique assets. And it's the assets of the business that dictate the income, the profitability, the fun, the stress, or the assets or the lack thereof. And most people are focusing on something that I call P&L thinking, profit and loss thinking, which is sales, marketing, lead generation, conversions, which all fit within driving P&L. But most people, especially small businesses, are not thinking about what I would call balance sheet thinking, which is the underlying assets of the business that you're leveraging. So if you imagine a real estate example, if you go to the middle of Mayfair and look at a 3-bedroom apartment in Mayfair, London, versus a 3-bedroom apartment in Liverpool, there's going to be a massive price difference. And let's imagine 2 salespeople, real estate salespeople, trying to sell those properties. And one says, I am so clever because I just sold a property for £2 million. I'm way cleverer than you are because you only sold yours for £250,000. And it's actually, they're both exactly the same people with the same sales skills, but the underlying asset is ridiculously more valuable in Mayfair than in Liverpool. So essentially what is going on with most small businesses is that they're running around being that salesperson, that real estate salesperson, trying to improve their sales patter and their skills at prospecting and things like that, but they're not actually turning their Liverpool property into a Mayfair property.
I like it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, I often use the analogy of, and bear with me, it's tenuous, but I think a lot of people, they're very skilled, they're very gifted, and they're just not playing in the right place. And it's a little bit like I walked into McDonald's and there's Yoda flipping burgers. And you think, wow, Yoda, you're amazing. I want to work with you. And he says, sorry, dude, I just flip burgers. He's doing the wrong thing in the wrong place.
Yeah. Or being Yoda, maybe he's in the right place.
Yeah. Wow.
Who knows what's going to happen at that McDonald's? No, but no, exactly that. So, and then the other distinction in that book is that the assets have changed. So, whereas most people over the age of 35 probably think of assets as land, labor, capital, an enterprise, whatever you learnt in business school, or you might think of assets as properties and tangible kind of assets. The vast majority of assets now is made up of intellectual property, brand, systems, company culture. So these assets actually make up more than 85% of the value of the stock market, and yet we don't have very good names for them.
Yeah, I totally get that. So when we're talking about assets, if I maybe look at Dent Global, and then you've written these books, and I think like a lot of business owners, you write the books not because you were a born author, it's because they are obviously you might be, but they're an amazing way to build an audience, to build a loyal tribe, to build appetite. And then behind that, there is a business. And I'm curious, and this is the nosy part of my interview, and I make no apology for this, but across all of Dent Global, what would maybe be the 2 or 3 key revenue streams?
So the revenues, about 50% is accelerator revenues. So our accelerators, we've got 3 accelerators, which is the startup accelerator for very early stage companies. And typically our annual fee is around $3,000 for a very early stage company to work with them all year.
That's really, really reasonable.
Yeah. So it's exactly right. It's because they haven't really got revenues yet. So it's for us, it's just about kicking off the relationship. And then you've got our key person of influence program, which is you've got to be above $100,000 worth of revenue or £85,000 to get yourself on that. But most companies are more high 6-figure, early 7-figure, and that is and the fee for that for the year is about £7,000. And then you've got something that we run called Better Every Quarter, which is an ongoing coaching and development program to build a better business every single quarter, which works out at about £300 a month. So globally, we have about 50% of our revenues that are from accelerators, and on each time zone we have around 500 core business clients who kind of sign on with us each year. And then we have an award-winning IT services company, which is a 7-figure business, and it actually builds It builds IT projects, so it does IT implementation. It builds a lot of shopping carts and e-commerce platforms, e-learning platforms. And we've won like major global awards, awards where over 10,000 companies apply and we come out and win it. We've got a multi-award-winning film production business that creates films, online digital films. And we actually have clients like Nike and Cadbury and Land Securities and big FTSE companies that we work with as well as entrepreneurs. And then we have a book publishing side to the business, which is also a 7-figure business. And we publish about 500 authors. We sign about 75 new books per year. And to put that in perspective, Penguin does about 25.
Right.
So we smash out really great books. We know how to market books and produce books, and our book catalog is growing every single year. We're hosting awards now, and we're actually attracting phenomenal authors like Olympic athletes and ex-military, senior ranking people. So that's a good part of the business. And then we have a ventures arm to the business where we do equity stakes, and we actually take stakes in businesses. We do fundraising. And as a result of like the work we do in the ventures side of the business, we actually take stakes in companies and then produce films, produce digital assets, publish stuff for them, and actually add a lot of that capability to the side. So if you think about this, I know it sounds really complex to someone on the outside. It's actually a really simple business for us on the inside. We've got the accelerators, and then we've got the services and ventures side of the business.
It's actually a really nice little ecosystem that is it's almost like a symbiotic organism there. It's really, really cool.
Exactly. So the 3 of the companies we bought, so we acquired the companies. When we bought those companies, we saw growth of 300% growth in 2 years, just because it plugs into the ecosystem so well. So that's been great. And then, I can't help myself. Every now and then I have a great idea for a new company and go off and start something. So recently we developed a little piece of technology for our own business that was a hugely successful marketing activity for us. And it relied upon a piece of technology that we built. And then our clients started saying, this little piece of tech generated 75,000 leads, data-rich, amazing leads. And that resulted in close to 10 million worth of sales. And basically a lot of our clients said, hey, we want one of those as well. So we started building them, and then we thought we need to turn this into a SaaS business so that it's really cheap and really easy for people to leverage this strategy. So we went and set up scoreapp.com, which has been great. We launched it about 7 months ago, and we've just raised some money for it independently. So it's a funded company now. And we've got an amazing team of 6 developers building month in, month out. We've just signed up our 300th client. So yeah, it's a cool, really cool new sideline business too. And it puts me in startup mode, which is my favorite.
Well, I think ScoreApp is going to be huge. I do a lot of sort of rummaging around before an interview, and I came across ScoreApp through your LinkedIn profile. And it's awesome. I hear people asking about, how can I do this, every couple of days in Facebook groups. And the answers to that question are usually quite expensive.
Yeah. So
what you've brought to market there looks very flexible. It looks...
We used to build scorecards for £9,000 with our IT services company because they were all bespoke. And by the time we actually bespoke built these scorecards, it would typically come out all in about £6,000 to £9,000 to do a setup. And that exact same... and then we would probably charge $50 to $150 a month for just hosting and tweaks and changes and all that sort of stuff. That exact same system is now £25 a month.
Yeah. I'm sitting here thinking about the cost of an average Facebook ads campaign. If you've got something like ScoreApp at the end of that as the destination, for a lot of business owners, it's really compelling. So I wish you a lot of success with that.
Thank you. I'm glad you feel that way, because it's internally we just geek out on this stuff all the time. We're super excited, and we we see the future as being very much about data, and that small businesses really need to have simple ways to leverage data, and that's what we're trying to do.
So something I'm curious about, and I'm always curious about this with people who have done very, very well, who've managed to grow businesses, or even the people who simply portray the impression that they have, is you come across as very competent, very experienced, so lots of authority. But in real terms, what part of your business do you struggle most with?
I struggle a bit with time zones because we're in Sydney and Toronto. It's not easy that as soon as I open my eyes in the morning, it's quite possible that I might have a full day of things that have gone on in the Australian side of the business or the Sydney office. I might not, but I'm or I might have someone who wants to talk to me before it's close of business in Australia, and then sometimes in the same day even, I will have a chat with one of my guys in Toronto at 8-9 o'clock at night. And that can be a day. Like, it can be genuinely 7 a.m. till 9 o'clock at night. And it's like not really stopping much in between. So one thing that I love is having a global business, and one thing I hate is having a global business.
I totally get that. I have a couple of clients on the US West Coast, and yeah, I'm just thinking about packing up for the day and making some dinner, and they're like full on.
Yeah,
they've just woken up.
Time to talk.
Oh, guys, it's 5 o'clock, tapping my watch. But no, they don't get that.
Yeah. And so that definitely. And then for me personally, when everything's running smoothly, it's bliss, it's great. But very occasionally, the shit hits the fan in 3 different places at once. And then it's kind of like, oh, wow, okay, I've got 3 pots boiling over all at once. I can personally handle if something, and there's always something going wrong, but if there's 1 or 2 things going wrong at any given time, that's easy. But if there's a few things going wrong in a few different places at once, I struggle with that. I hit my upper limit, and my little monkey or reptile brain takes over.
Daniel, I'm looking at the time. I know you have things to do today, so I don't want to take too much of your time. If people do want to connect with you, if they want to sort of move forward with Dent Global, obviously they need to read your books, but how can people connect with you?
Well, on all the social medias other than TikTok, I'm not doing any coordinated dancing at this point in my life. So so TikTok's off the radar, but other than that,
right there with you.
All the social medias are fine: LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, but also just Dent.Global. You can check out the website there. keypersonofinfluence.com if you want to read some of the blogs, and then scoreup.com if you're interested in the scorecards. So that's kind of the ecosystem there.
And obviously, I have my signature question that I have been really good at not forgetting recently, and that's, what's one thing that you do now that you wish you'd started 5 years ago?
CrossFit. I actually wish I had have gotten into fitness a little bit earlier. I know that everyone who does CrossFit becomes a CrossFit like evangelist, but I should, 5 years ago would have been a better time to be getting myself a little bit fit, so that I don't have so much catching up to do. It's actually also kind of good for the spirit as well.
Yeah, it is. How long have you been doing it?
Only 3 months. 3 times a week, for 3 months.
That's long enough to be feeling the benefit.
Yeah. And actually the first 2 weeks, I felt every single day, I felt like a train had hit me, to the extent that I actually had to take ibuprofen in the first week or 2, just because I was aching so much. and then most recently, it's like I feel weird if I don't, and it's kind of like I've hit that weird thing of like the body wants to go down there, it's craving it. So something like just having that extra dimension to life would have been it's a more recent discovery, and it's one of those things that it's quite obvious that I would have benefited 5 years ago.
Daniel, you've been a treat to speak to. It's been really good fun.
Thanks, Bob. Likewise.
If anybody's listening, you need to go read Daniel's books, but thank you so much for your time. Redefining what you think of as normal for you is the first step in getting results nobody expected. Give yourself permission to daydream a little about what you could do, and then ask yourself this: why just daydream? Before I go, just a quick reminder to subscribe, and if you haven't already, join my Facebook group. You'll find a link in the show notes or visit amplifyme.fm/insiders. I would love for you to connect with me on social media. You'll find me wherever you hang out at Bob Gentle. And if you do, message me and let me know so I can follow you back. If you enjoyed the show, then I would love for you to review it on iTunes. It's the best way to help me reach more subscribers, and it means a lot to me. My name's Bob Gentle. Thanks again to Daniel for giving us his time this week, and to you for listening. And I'll see you next week.